welcome back to this Shipper Update. I'm Zach Strickland here with our chief economist, Anthony Smith, and it is a Thursday, and that means one thing. We check on those jobless claims, right, Anthony?
That's right, and Zach, this morning, if you looked at those initial jobs claims, you might think, is there a typo going on here? Because we just hit another record low that hasn't been seen in 54 years. Zach, 164 applicants in the latest report. So we're now in the 160s for initial jobs claims. We haven't seen this in over 50 years. And this is just something that, it's been a full, half a century since it was this low. So this really shows the type of strength that's in the jobs market right now. Fewer people filing for unemployment benefits. And you have to wonder at a certain point in time, like, okay, is there going to be an upward adjustment on these numbers and we start moving forward? What's going on here with some of the seasonality? What's happening?
Right.
But then you just start looking at, okay, the unemployment rate just hit down to 3.6%, just a 0.1% off of the pre-pandemic level. The participation rate is still not at the pre-pandemic level, so we don't have the same workforce as we did before the pandemic. Right. But looking at this number, a little bit staggering.
Yeah, and you hit on a good point there. The workforce isn't the same as it was before the pandemic. I think obviously there's been a lot of the women have been removed from the job force because of daycare issues and things like that. We're in a different world than we were before the pandemic. The remote work culture has kind of also made this somewhat more fluid, if you will. But can you kind of elaborate on what you mean when we're talking about like this is a different kind of environment versus that? Does that 3.6%? Is it the equivalent of the 3.6% before the pandemic?
It's not. It doesn't hit the same. So when we're looking at the 3.6 now versus 3.6 or 3.5 before the pandemic, we're looking at more individuals, a larger workforce. We're looking at a large workforce of a very rich in knowledge generation baby boomers that had years and years of experience. We're moving forward, a lot of baby boomers are starting to pull away from the workforce. If you can retire early, a lot of them opted out to, hey, I'm going to retire early. No need to go through another potential long recession. We didn't know at the time how long this was going to last. So a lot of folks just opted out of the workforce. We still have some individuals that are saying, hey, I don't know about this COVID thing. I don't know how this is going to play out. This has changed me for quite some time.
Right.
I am still not okay. So there's going to be a few individuals that are still going to be opting out, and there's going to be some that just got used to this. I'm not going to return to the workforce style. Maybe they're working something that would not qualify them for the unemployment benefits, but also opt them out of getting recorded. So there's a whole mix of miscellaneous factors that can really add up together to really kind of go into this much lower number for initial jobs claims. 160s, that's something that, like I said, I thought was going to be a typo initially. I had to click on it, go to a couple different links and make sure that, okay, this is the actual number.
Now we're seeing obviously a totally different result in the freight market right now. We're in a transitional period. Now I know it's been literally like a few weeks of tender rejections coming lower, but the freight market obviously does have a pretty good lead time on the overall economy. Are you concerned that this might be kind of like where we're seeing this latent kind of trough in these unemployment numbers and that we might start to see some things start to take back up?
For sure. I mean, if we're looking at this being a type of a peak in a sense, then there's only one way that we can start kind of trending towards. The big question is how long can it last and how long can it stay strong? Because when we look at this market, the jobs market, this is like the last consumer stronghold. We're looking at inflationary pressures eating up into wage growth. When you're looking at inflationary pressures in general, when you're looking at so many different factors of uncertainty outside of the U.S., international conflicts, things like that, there's a lot kind of going against the consumer. But when we're looking at the jobs market, that's our last stronghold. And so once we start looking at things like the quit rate and this job sentiment or employee or consumer confidence number, that's going to be one of those areas that's really going to be pertinent for these consumers, because once those that confidence starts getting shaken up around, hey, can I go find a new job? Can I get a higher paying role? Once that confidence starts to erode a little bit, that's when we'll start to see, all right, there's going to be a pullback in not just spending on goods, but also services. And the other big part that also kind of factors into it as well is when we're looking at the lack of spending on goods, that's going to also eat into the overhead, or the margin, I should say, for a lot of shippers that supply goods. And so that means fewer job openings, fewer options for a lot of consumers. It's this vicious circle that kind of starts to happen a little bit.
Yeah, so what do you think we can do to kind of like break this cycle real quick?
So I think one of the big things is services are going to happen.
Right.
So we have to really got to go all into the services, make sure that there's adequate services for the consumer to spend on. Mm-hmm. That's not going to help the goods market at all. For the goods market, a lot of those inventories we're going to talk about a little bit later on, if you're free to do a podcast around 12 o'clock or so. Check it out, maybe, Freedonomics, but I think there's going to be a potential push forward on a lot of consumer goods that are just piling up upstream just to kind of get out there. There just needs to be a constant flow. That's going to be a potential deflationary pressure, as some of those goods aren't going to be able to go out at full price that those suggested retail markups were going to be. Some are going to have to be heavily discounted, but it's still going to be moving. There's still going to be goods. Inventory costs and levels are going to come down.
All right, well, I guess that's some decent news if you need some retail therapy out there, but we'll toss it back over to Mike Vincent.